Hello and welcome back to Tech TV. Today we're going to be talking about a special report that we're doing on AI and anthropomorphism. This obviously is the tendency that people have to treat objects and technology as if they have a personality and as if they are living beings. Very much in the way that, Pete, that sometimes we pretend that you're alive and living.
Absolutely. I mean, I must be a victory of anthropomorphisation or whatever you want to call it. I mean, maybe it's basically, I mean, I bet you didn't know this. The actual word comes from making things look like God, because God made us in his own image. So there you go. That's what we're doing.
I'm not sure how godlike we look, but I believe that this is a growing problem. The way in which we depend on technology, whether we're relying on it to help us with reports, whether we're relying on it to help us map read, or a whole load of things that we're becoming increasingly reliant on technology for. If we're engaging in a way, what is the way in which we're engaging in it where we imbue it with some level of personality?
Well, I've seen company directors actually telling me that ChatGPT thinks like them. I've seen there was a famous case of the guy working for Google who said that the Google AI that he was working with, he was an AI engineer, he said that it was alive. This is a big issue, and it's a huge issue, Bill, if you think about it. I mean, because this sort of thing has been going on forever. Yeah, children used to have imaginary friends. The imaginary friend was a staple of fiction up to a point, and it goes back into history. We've liked to create things that come alive, toys that come alive. And we made actual operas and pieces of music about toys that come alive. So there's almost this inbuilt desire from people to actually imbue non-human objects or non-animate objects with some sort of life. If you think about it, you a former sailor, you used to call your boat, or still do call your boat, she's, don't you?
Well, yeah, very much so, but that's largely because it is a tradition, and being a nautical chap, I'd feel remiss if I wasn't sticking to the necessary etiquette. But I don't feel necessarily an impulse to give my car a name or any other object. I would call them it, and think of most inanimate objects or technologies in terms of an it or something there. I mean, I don't think, should we be referring them to as it, or is it something else? What is the correct way to address these objects?
Well, I think that you've hit the nail on the it head. It is a problem. It is a problem because people are starting to call things it. Now, one of the things that the EU was actually insisting on in the early days of talking about AI is that there needed to be some clear differentiation between a human being and a machine, so that you actually knew there was that distinction and that discrimination. We are allowing that to be diluted or to just decay a little because of this way that we have of using technology. And it's not right. There's going to be two issues. One issue is there are mental health concerns, because if you start to attribute attributes that do not exist to a piece of technology, then you're going to have mental health problems along the way or down the line.
Yeah, I mean,
but Bill, there's a second point, and that second point is that it costs money. One of the things that Sam Altman actually acknowledged is that people are saying please and thank you to IT systems.
I'm not somebody who had an imaginary friend as a child, and I probably would be guilty of not really taking others seriously who did. My concern in this space is that at least when you had an imaginary friend, that person was entirely in your mind. Whereas if you're talking to Siri or Alexa or any other AI, and you're having a conversation with it, it is replying to you, and to a large extent it will be reinforcing ideas you have, and that might take you down a rabbit hole. And my concern here is that we can become overly reliant on some of these technologies. As a former naval officer, I pride myself on my ability to read a chart or a map and to navigate. But I see so many of the younger generation these days who've grown up with sat-nav and are over-reliant on that and can't read a map. And I worry that there are so many other aspects of what we do in society where we're becoming exceedingly reliant on the technology, and where I think we're losing some of the skills that would allow us to function properly if the technology was interrupted or failed at any point.
Yeah, but you're picking up on some of the points that we picked up in the research that we did, which has eventually become this radio program. Yeah, Edward Moser, the Nobel Prize-winning neurologist, he says that one of the things that we will lose if we don't use maps is our inner mental map. That's an important cognitive thing to actually develop. One of the ways that you learn your way around, because Moses' research was into how you navigate through spaces. You create signposts in your brain. You create landmarks. And that's one of the things that you do when you're map reading. So, yeah, though that isn't in the program, but Professor Angela Sasse makes the point that one of the reasons that we do this, one of the reasons why we anthropomorphize, is we want to have a familiarity with something. It reassures us. And so we then become to rely on this thing. We rely on the technology and we think that we're part of it. Whereas, in fact, when it goes wrong, and that's the point that you're talking about, that's when you're in trouble. And you're in trouble because you don't understand the underlying mechanism, which is going back to what Professor Edward Moser said.
But what about not just relying it to conduct a function for you like map reading? What if you become emotionally reliant or emotionally entangled with a technology? Do you see that being as a danger?
Well, that is a big problem. It's a problem. Again, it's complex. Let's take one point and let's pick up on that complex word. Last week, Apple said that AI failed when it had to deal with complex problems. Now, that could just be a factor of the fact that it hasn't actually developed enough yet. However, at the moment, you shouldn't trust it. Yet a guy in New York discovered that his daughter had been talking to Siri for over 2 years, and that it had been asking Siri to give her advice on how she should, make life choices. One of the problems there is that these systems actually, they reflect back to you. They're taking their cues from you. And that was one of the things that psychologists found really early on with AI systems. The way that they develop them is so they get more information about you by reflecting back to you what you're saying, and you're unaware of that. Now, that's one problem. It's a problem because some people are beginning to use AI systems for psychotherapy. Being reflected back to you what your problems are isn't necessarily a good idea. I mean, if you think about somebody who's got suicidal tendencies and who wanted to talk about those suicidal tendencies, you could actually get an AI system encouraging them to commit suicide. And there have been a few examples of this that have occurred on the web already. And we talked to a psychotherapist about this who says that that's a problem. You've also got a problem of emotional dependency. Now, you could say, hang on, for some people, this could be very, very helpful. You could get very lonely people. And apparently, AI systems are actually better at helping lonely people. They could be more empathetic than a human being, which does actually, though, Bill, that throws up a really interesting question, doesn't it?
Well,
Are you alive if you're talking to a machine?
I'm very familiar with what I think are far too many people who use screens and other forms of electronic entertainment as artificial childcare. And what I think you're probably hinting at here in terms of company is that there is going to be a large number of older people who desperately need company, and that AI may have a role to play here. But in terms of what you talked about psychology, I believe that you spoke to Elouis Skinner, a psychologist and a specialist in this particular arena. Here's a little clip, and maybe you can introduce her as we start. A little clip of exactly what she had to say.
No, Eloise was taking that
psychotherapy. Obviously, this is like a concern of that people would not get sort of professional help and instead would just feed their problems into an AI tool, which obviously has many issues around confidentiality and privacy and things like that. But also, as you mentioned, one of the issues is that these tools are generally trained to affirm your perspective. So what will happen is it will start to repeat your narrative back to you. And for people who are stuck in sort of patterns that they actually want to break, sometimes that really isn't what you need from therapy. Or in fact, you don't really need advice at all. You actually need someone to listen and then to give you some more thoughts and then to listen again. So it can be, there can be areas in which this can be quite dangerous, I think.
Yeah, I mean, then there's Eloise. She very kindly agreed to participate immediately after her yoga lesson, which is the reason why you can see her in that setting. She's making this point that you can actually confide information. The other thing is, these AI systems, they don't have legal entity, Bill. This is a big issue. In Donald Trump, who is the US president, in his big, beautiful bill, he's saying that AI will get a get out of jail free card for 10 years. There won't be any regulation that will apply to it for 10 years so that AI can develop. It was a position that J.D. Vance elaborated on in February at the Munich summit. So there's a problem there. You can't sue them. So you can't sue the manufacturer. They're not liable. They could be giving you bad information, and you have no comeback whatsoever.
Surely you still have a comeback depending on which jurisdiction you're in. I mean, I doubt the European Union is going to follow in Donald Trump's shoes in giving a get out of free card for companies for 10 years for all aspects of what they do in every jurisdiction. I think we're probably going to see some AI regulation in other key jurisdictions such as the UK or the EU. Obviously, there's the big beautiful bill is yet to pass in the US, and it may yet be amended. But I would certainly be concerned if this provision to take all responsibility from AI and AI companies for 10 years were enacted, because I think we need a level of responsibility and we need a level of regulation. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. However, Keir Starmer and the Labour administration have signalled that they're not too keen on regulating AI. There is currently a battle going on between quite a few people in the House of Lords and the government about AI and copyright. And even that, Bill, is an issue for this, because one of the reasons why the AI companies want to be able to cut into copyright, they want to actually take on the artists, is because they want to humanize that AI interface so that you think it is human, that it's the artists and the creatives who are very, very good at creating that discourse. That's why it's very valuable.
But this takes us really much into the sort of realm of ethics and actually what the motivation is for the large AI companies. And I believe that it's largely commercial. And you spoke, I believe, to Jonnie Penn from Cambridge University on some of this. What's Jonnie's role for Cambridge, and what were his thoughts?
He's the professor of AI ethics and society, and he was basically making the point that you're saying. He was actually saying you have to. Harry Evans, the very famous investigative journalist, said things are not what they appear on the surface. You must always dig deeper, and that's one of the things. Yeah, why are these companies offering you these AI systems?
Users of ChatGPT don't realize is the system is studying them and changing itself to sweeten the experience of using the product. And the long-term kind of aim here is to be the first port of call between you and online commerce.
And obviously, the fact that the online commerce is the ultimate goal here is what's driving all investment ultimately in AI and all technology. But surely regulation needs to come hand in hand with this.
Of course. Okay. So what does AI do? Peter Kyle, the technology minister, UK technology minister, earlier this week in the Guardian newspaper, he was saying that ChatGPT knows him. Okay, well, what's his relationship with ChatGPT? The problem is that ChatGPT does know him. It knows what he wants. It knows what he might be wanting to buy. It knows what he thinks that he needs. And it sells that information. It sells that information because that's in the terms and conditions that you've given permission for, and that information is being passed on to other companies. It's also letting you have this service, and in return for that service, you're giving it information. You're giving it more information about you, and you're giving it more information that can be capitalized on. So what's the solution? The solution to this is you should own your own AI. You should own your own data. Data ownership is going to be one of the biggest issues of the next 10 years. You should actually decide how your data gets used, where it gets used, and you should also get a significant return for that. It's your data.
But unfortunately, the driving thing behind all of this is entirely commercial, and what we're seeing, certainly in the US, in the legislation there, is the fact that the large tech firms have the upper hand in influencing what the destination is. There aren't enough people in public and in society calling out for ethics in AI and regulation of AI. It would be far better if there were. But to a large extent, the vast majority of the population are stumbling blindly towards a destination that I think we'll all live to regret. Do you think that there is likely to be major incidents, things going terribly wrong, just as we've seen in cybersecurity, that might be a wake-up call?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think there's going to be some terrible things that happen. So just to go to one point that you raised, there are a lot of people who are actually raising concerns about this. We actually have found a lot of people that we're going to be interviewing over the next few days who've got some very relevant points to make about this. The problem is that the government seems to be, and that's governments across the world, many of them seem to be wanting to close down this discussion. And I don't think they're going to be successful with that. To go to your point about the population, no, there is a very famous quote from the literary critic Kenneth Tynan, who said that a critic is someone who knows the way but can't drive the car. The population neither knows the way nor can drive the car, if you take what you were saying about maps earlier. And that's got to be changed. Awareness of this has to be raised among the public at large, because they're actually being duped, and they're being duped by these big tech companies.
Well, This is a fascinating topic, and I'm sure that we're going to return to it. And there's a whole set of related issues around AI and its implementations, around all of the ethics here and regulations. So no doubt it'll be a topic we'll be revisiting a number of times. I'm grateful for you to share some of your thoughts and those interviews that you had with Elouis and with Jonnie. And I look forward to picking up on this in the near future.
Oh yeah, and also though, remember, the radio program can also be listened to via the same website that you can actually pick this TV program up from.
Well, there we are. We are truly multimedia, not only TV and radio, but you'll also see articles published on some of our websites. So we welcome you to come back and join us, and we'll pick up this debate, no doubt, in the very near future. Thank you.
And also, Phil, for reasons of utter transparency, just before we go, we will also put links up to the interviews that we did so that people can also make up their own minds.
Well, if they are making up their own minds and not being induced to do so by some sort of artificial intelligence. But who knows? Anyway, thank you all. See you again soon.